Confident, confident, confident. I can be confident, 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 confident. I can be confident at work.
Hello and welcome to the Confident at Work podcast. I'm your host and your confidence coach, Anna Manning. And today we're talking about when there are just too many things on your plate. Maybe you're feeling overwhelmed. Maybe you're feeling like you can't see the wood for the trees. Everybody experiences this at some point during their career. And we're going to touch on three areas. What's happening when you're overwhelmed by tasks? What happens when that overwhelm then takes control of the situation? And most importantly, how can you get back on track? So I often see this situation firsthand with my clients. We always do a check in at the beginning. I say, "How are you feeling today?" And it's not a, "How are you?" And you say, "Yes, I'm fine, thank you." It's like, "How are you actually feeling? What is going on for you today?" And there will be a session, a moment where a client says, "Do you know what? I don't know whether I'm coming or going. I can't see the wood for the trees. I've got way too many things on my plate." And they kind of look at me with these like staring, slightly like blank or slightly panicky eyes. And in that moment, because I've experienced it with a client many times before, I know that there is no point in coaching on developing somebody's professional confidence on that day. So I'll typically ask, like, what would be most supportive for you today? And usually they'll say, "I need to get back on track." So instead of doing what we plan to, we'll give that client some time and some space, and I'll provide some structure for them to get back on track. Something happens to us when this kind of overwhelmed at the amount of stuff we have to do takes over. And I typically see one or more of three responses. And this might have happened to you in those moments where there is just so much to do that you just can't really seem to do much at all. And the first of those three is total shutdown. Now, you might be physically present during this time. So you may still be sat at a desk or at your laptop. You may still be tapping around and doing things, but actually, you are mentally checked out, even if you're physically present. And you're actually completely unable to engage productively with anything. You might have a kind of glazed, overwhelmed look. You might be sort of staring around. This is complete overwhelm and it is shut down based on that overwhelm. Now, this may be a very intelligent response in terms of your body and your mind to something that just feels like it's way too much. When you're in that shutdown mode, of course, you can't productively engage with what it is you have to do and get yourself back on track. The other response that I see is this slight kind of panic response. So instead of not being able to do anything, you speed up but probably not in a very productive way. So you might jump around from task to task, probably without making very much progress. You may have loads of tabs open. You may have loads of unfinished pieces of work. And you may feel like you're doing things, but you may not actually be gaining much traction because you may just not really be doing the right things. The third response I see is this kind of frozen state where, and it's similar to the second one, right? It's similar to this panic response, but it's more you keep making lists, you keep trying to sort things out, but you don't seem to actually be able to action any of it. Now, anyone who's got way too much on their plate could have one of these or a mixture of them. And you might have experienced these before. I certainly know that I have. I had one period in my professional career where I had so much to do that I felt like I was going like the clappers all day. So I felt like I was going really fast, but I wasn't actually being very productive. I was doing a lot of fairly unproductive things quite fast, which possibly looked good to my overwhelmed brain, but really actually wasn't. So that kind of state, those kinds of states of I'm overwhelmed or I'm just so stressed because I've got so much going on that I've gone into one of those modes like shutdown or panic or kind of frozen state. If that's left, it can impact, of course, your productivity and your well being. And in this episode, I'm not really talking about an entire kind of burnout freeze response where actually what you need to do is step away and have a month away from work, or what you need to do is actually go and visit your general practitioner and talk to your boss and your HR team about the fact that you cannot be at work right now, right? I'm not talking about a scenario which has gone as far as that or feels as deeply as that for you. So I'm asking you to just use your judgment on this. I'm talking about a scenario where you know that you're engaged in lots of unproductive things. You know that you've got way too much to do and you can't seem to do it. But you think that if you actually had the time and the space to just step back, you would be able to refocus and get back on track. And I just want this podcast episode to be a resource for you because it's great. If you're my client and you're working with me and you come to me one day and you're like, I can't see the wood for the trees. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know whether I'm coming or going. I need to get back on track. Brill, you've got me for 1 hour to provide the space, the support, the structure, the questions, the challenge to give you that supported time to step back, reflect, refocus, and get back on track. You have that if you're working with me. If you don't, and you're not working with anyone, you don't. So, I want this podcast episode to be a resource that you can use in those moments where there's just too much going on and you need to take a step back and refocus. And I'm going to go through some practical steps that you can take because in that state, when there's way too much going on and you can't see the wood for the trees, it's very difficult for that overwhelmed, emotional brain to do the job of stepping back, taking stock, refocusing, and getting back on track. It's very difficult for that brain to do that. You almost have to enter a different state, a calmer state, before it's possible. So, I want to walk you through some practical steps that you can just come back to at any time and you can go through in order to help reset, refocus, and get back on track. So, the first step, number one, is take a step back. You might feel like there's no time to plan, but flailing around in panic is not productive. So use this as the permission that you may need to step away, take 30 minutes or take an hour, but do it. And I know what your brain's going to say because my clients' brains always argue with me on this. They say, but I don't have time to do that. I have to go, 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 do. Well, you know what? Now is not the time to be trusting the part of your brain which is telling you that you don't have time. Because if you leave that part of your brain in charge, you're still going to be in this mess in a week from now. So 30 minutes or 60 minutes out of the next week is time so well spent. You need it in order to reset, refocus, get back on track and start being productive and engaging effectively in what it is you're trying to do. So take it. Step 2 is to send up a flag if you can. So you may have to communicate with your boss, with your team, with your board, whatever. Let them know that at the moment you are unavailable for new work and that you're taking a moment to step back so that you can refocus, reprioritize, and get back on track. But make them aware that it may take you a few days. So if this is possible for you, make the request. And even if you don't think people are going to honor it, maybe just make the request as a little bit of arse covering. Number 3 is if when you've done this, planning still feels impossible, you need to do nothing for at least 10 minutes. And I mean nothing. No phone, no nothing, no music, no nothing. Go outside if you can. Move around if that helps you, but you need to unload. However you do that, your brain needs not any more input. So cut all the inputs and take nothing for at least 10 minutes. But if you feel like you're now able to, once you give that space to step back, if you feel like you're able to, Next step, step 4, is to do a brain dump. So, what we want to do here is get everything out of your head and onto a piece of paper or your screen. That might include work tasks and it might include personal stuff as well, which might have been backing up behind this wave of stuff that you've had to do. But basically, what we don't want at this stage is your brain, which is already overloaded, to be any more overloaded. We want to take some of that cognitive load away from your brain and externalize it. Down on the piece of paper or on the screen, brain dump. Everything out of your head and down onto that piece of paper or down onto that saved document. And FYI, this is not a to-do list. This is just a clearinghouse for the things that you have otherwise been storing in your brain. If you already have a system that works really nicely where you capture things and store things, great. Go ahead and do your brain dump there. If you don't, piece of paper or a document on your screen will work absolutely fine. So once you've done that brain dump, step 5 is to plan just for today. Just for today. And I want you to be aware that an overwhelmed brain will try to be optimistic, should I say, about the amount of things that you can achieve in one day. We do not want you to do that at this point. Believe me, it will feel like a good idea and it is a bad idea. We need to lower the pressure. We need to lower the input. Therefore, you're going to make a realistic plan just for today. And you're going to put on there results that you're going to create today. So it's not work on this a bit, work on that a bit. It is get this to X place and send it to Y. Finish and file that, right? I don't know what your example would be, but you want to put down what the result's going to be, not that you're just going to be working on something or leaving it open-ended, because that is also very difficult for your brain. What you may also want to do is break down those tasks into smaller chunks. An overwhelmed brain's going to be staring at a huge task and it won't necessarily know how to break it down. You're going to have to guide it through that. So look at that task. Think about what are the component parts that need to be done. If I was going to break this down into, say, 20-minute or 30-minute chunks, what are those chunks? And maybe list all of those out so you can tick through them as you go. That will take more cognitive load away from your brain and down onto your piece of paper or your screen. And once you do that, some people like to also put a time block against that. So maybe you spend the morning doing this, the afternoon doing that. Again, that will further allow your brain to relax because it knows that if you just do this one thing at a time, your day will proceed. And remember, you can only effectively work on one thing at a time. The idea of multitasking is frankly a lie if you're doing difficult cognitive tasks. I'm guessing the kind of work you do, you cannot effectively do two things at once. Therefore, once you've created your daily plan, you're just going to take it one job at a time. And while you're doing that one job, there is nothing else that your brain needs to do. So that's step 5, plan just for today. Step 6 is close down notifications. So if you can, I want you to turn off email, Slack, Teams, phone. Any notifications that are going to be popping up and pinging are going to add to your cognitive load, which is what we do not want right now while you're trying to get back on track. So you want to take away, you want to subtract those distractions, those notifications as much as you possibly can. Maybe let people know if it's urgent, actually call me because I'm not going to be picking things up for the next 3 hours. Most people will also argue with me on this, but most people can do it. Step 7 is to set a hard stop time within your daily plan. Decide when you do your daily plan, what time you're going to finish working today, and then stick to it. And once you're done, you're done. Switch down, close down, and go home. Do not be checking emails. Do not be opening your phone. Do not be opening your laptop. Keep them physically distanced from you if you have to. We are reducing cognitive load. And this is one of the ways that we're going to do it, is by giving your brain a chance to relax, recuperate, pick a hard stop time and stick to it. Your brain's going to tell you, oh, you can't do that. You have to keep working. You have to keep working. Well, you don't, because ultimately you're going to stay less effective for longer. The last step is optional because you may or may not need to do this, but at some point, you may need to do a decision amnesty. And I think I made that title up, but I might not have done. A decision amnesty basically is where you write down all of the unmade decisions that are floating around in your brain. Now, when you're overwhelmed, when there's way too many tasks, there's too much stuff going on, decisions are one of the things that can get backed up behind it all. And once you've got loads of unmade decisions, that is more cognitive load. It's like having a load of tabs open on your computer. It is going to make it run slower. It's also making your brain run slower. And it's creating a bottleneck, maybe for you, maybe for other people in your team. So, decision amnesty it. Every decision that is currently unmade and whirling around your brain, whether that's work life, personal life, whatever, get it down onto a piece of paper. Once they're all down, I want you to go through and make every decision. And if you can't make a decision, I want you to write down the step that you're going to take next in order to get you closer to that decision. Do you need extra information? Do you need to speak to X person? Decide what the step is that you will take in order to get closer to making that decision. All right. They are my 8 steps to reset, refocus, and get back on track. Now, if you find that none of this is working, please have a conversation with somebody. You may be in a state which is going past where this advice is helpful, and that may indicate that you need to think of something else. You need to have a conversation with somebody else. Okay, I hope that was helpful. Let this episode be a resource for you to return to whenever you need, because, as I said, this overwhelmed brain that can't really see the wood for the trees and has all of these tasks and information piling up behind will find it difficult to take the time to step back, refocus, replan, and get back on track. You may need some structure and some support to help your brain to do that in that moment where it's going to find it most difficult. So use this podcast as a resource to do that. And if you're noticing that this is happening with a team member or a colleague, give them this podcast and let them use that as a resource for them too. If you want to come and work with me, there are links in the show notes. You can come and coach with me privately on your professional development or confidence, or you can come and join at the Members Club. If you're a woman, professional, and you love the podcast, you'll love the Members Club. The next thing is to take the confidence assessment. So it is the accompanying resource to this podcast. It takes you through a few simple questions designed to help you find out where you're at with your confidence and why. And based on your results, I give you some personalized feedback to tell you what I think you need to do in order to develop your confidence. So go to the link in the show notes, take that assessment, and see where you go with your results. All right, I will see you in next week's episode. Bye.
Confidence, confidence, confident. I can be confident. Confidence, confidence, confident. I can be confident at work.